Chapter 13, Academy Exam. While the whole ninja world discussed Orochimaru's defection, Fujin didn't bother with it and kept his focus on his training. After 2 weeks of training for transformation jutsu, it had finally improved to an acceptable level, though it still had a lot of space for improvement. After that, he began the training for substitution jutsu. This one was much tougher than the other two. It took nearly twice the time to learn this jutsu and master it to an acceptable level. However, it wasn't what Fujin had thought it to be. He thought, the technique is basically just misdirection. The main focus here is noticing your opponent's focus, and the instant he loses focus a bit, replace yourself with an object quickly enough so that the enemy won't notice you. It ain't an instant switcheroo. So it won't work against someone much stronger than you or someone having a Sheri non-activated. The object actually has to be very close to you, otherwise the jutsu will become much harder to be performed. Sigh, that makes sense. Instant switcheroo would have been too overpowered considering that every academy kid learns this technique. It does have a lot of variations though. Genjutsu, transformation jutsu, can be used to fool the enemy better. Chakra threads could be used to bring an object at a distance closer to you. It also states that a lower form summoning jutsu could be used to instantly summon the objects around you, while you hightail out of there. Still, though it ain't as overpowered as I thought, it is still very useful. The subtleness of misdirection would be a very important skill to have as a ninja. It could be applied in a lot of scenarios. I should still master it to the point of being able to do it without hand signs. But body flicker jutsu has to be focused much more now. I will also have to learn some wind and earth style escape jutsus. For nearly 2 months, Fujin kept on attempting these jutsus till he ran out of chakra. This process of training till he ran out of chakra had a marvelous effect on his chakra reserves. They increased considerably during these 2 months. During these 2 months, he also searched the library for scrolls on increasing chakra reserves. He found 2 scrolls very easily. One explained that chakra increased as one experienced physical and spiritual growth, i.e., it could be increased over time by doing physical exercises and meditation. Another compared chakra reserves to muscle. Just like how physical straining your muscles would increase muscles, chakra reserves would increase by straining it. So to increase the reserves, one had to keep using his chakra till he ran out of it. Fujin had been dependent on the above 2 till now, which explained the rapid growth in his chakra reserves. Apart from that, he also found a few other ways or theories. One scroll talked about using nature chakra, i.e., the sage mode, which would increase the chakra reserves and make it more potent for the time the sage mode was activated. Another scroll talked about increasing cellular activity. By making the cells more active, one could extract more chakra out of each cell, thus considerably increasing the reserves. It would also help in improving the physique. Fujin was quite impressed with this theory. Sadly, the way to increase cellular activity wasn't mentioned. Fujin wondered, I doubt it'll be easy to increase cellular activity. Otherwise this method would be very common. I wonder who came up with this theory. Perhaps I could contact that person in the future. On reading the scroll entirely, he saw the name of the person who wrote this scroll at the end. He was very surprised by it initially and then concluded, makes sense that it was the snake bastard who came up with this theory. TCH, seems like this method is a dead end. Maybe if I raid his bases in the future and get my hands on his research results, I could find the way if I get lucky, though the chances are pretty low to be honest. Otherwise I could try asking Tsunade. Her knowledge of the human body might exceed Orochimaru's. And she was his ex-teammate. It's possible that she helped Orochimaru on this. Sigh, another thing to consider for the future. The other theories were similarly not implementable. Some were not complete, some were detrimental in the long run. Fujin sighed and returned all the scrolls to their place. He thought, I guess my only option is asking Genki. Sadly, I don't have a reasonable excuse to explain why I want to increase my chakra level. His first question would be, how am I running out of chakra? And I can't tell him that I am practicing the basic jutsus on my own. If told it to him, and he told his colleagues, the word would eventually reach Hiruzen and Danzo. A 6-year-old orphan who can perform all 3 basic ninjutsus, it's a ticket straight into the root. After Fujin had those 3 jutsus down, he started to again allot time for other aspects. For the past 2 months, he had decreased his shuriken throwing practice time, dropped clay molding, stopped practicing chakra control and used to meditate only when he was totally drained of chakra. Among those 3 jutsus, he didn't intend to work much on the clone jutsu, as in the future he'll be replacing it with shadow clones and elemental clones. As for transformation jutsu, it was very difficult to completely master. So he just decided to focus on the appearance part. However, for substitution jutsu, he planned to master it completely. To the extent where he could do it instantly without the use of any hand signs. In these 2 months, he also progressed a lot in earth and wind nature training during the lectures. He was now instantly able to crumble a small stone into soil, and also able to cut a stone into 2. In a rather awkward but hilarious incident, his desk was once full of the soil from crumbled stones and he had to silently clear it after the classes were over. After that incident, he stopped crumbling the stones in the class. He wondered what he could do during that time though. Sadly, he couldn't think of a suitable replacement for earth nature training. So he just decided to further focus on wind nature and started carrying a small metal scrap into class and started to try to cut it. Over the next few months, he started to go out of his home and roam the streets of Konoha while using transformation jutsu to disguise himself as a random teenager. He identified a lot of isolated places in the bunch of mini forests within Konoha and started practicing tree climbing. It was very similar to walking on walls. Only difference being, the rougher surface of the trees. He managed to do it within an hour itself and moved on to water walking. Apart from that, he also read up on the gravity seal and a few suppression seals in the library. Another month went by in a similar manner, leaving less than a month to the final exams. Fujin finally wondered whether to start preparing for the exams. He thought still 25 days for written exams. It's still too early. However, after convincing himself a bit more, he sighed, whatever, it's my first exam in this world, might as well get it done with. While studying, he did note that the syllabus here was tougher than his previous world. It's probably what would be expected of a 9 to 10-year-old kid, and not from a 6 to 7-year-old kid. He wondered whether the syllabus in the ending years may actually provide a challenge to him. Soon final exams were upon the academy students. For all other students, the final exams were only the written part. However, for the ones in elite batches, more parameters were added. For Fujin's class, shuriken throwing competition, leaf concentration competition and taijutsu tournaments were arranged too. For shuriken throwing, a board with circles of different size but same center was placed and everyone had to hit it. The points depended on in which circle the shuriken hit, with the smallest circle having highest points and largest having the lowest. In all, the shuriken competition was worth 30 points. Leaf concentration competition was only to see how long one could keep the leaf from falling down. It was worth 20 points. The one who held it for the longest would get full 20 points and the points of others would depend on how long they kept the leaf from falling as compared to him. For example, if the one who held it for the longest held it for 30 minutes, he would get 20 points, whereas if someone else held it for only 21 minutes, he'd get only 14 points. The Taijutsu tournament was straightforward, with points depending on the rank. It was worth 50 points. And the written exam itself was worth 100 points. The exams finally happened. Fujin did get a laugh out of how serious everyone was for the exams. In the written exams, Fujin was confident that he answered everything right. Though he wasn't sure how everyone else performed. 2 days after the written exams, the other competitions were to be held. He guessed that they wanted to grade the written papers first, so that Hokage can reward the winner right there. They started the day with leaf concentration. Fujin, as he had already started to practice water walking, was quite confident in this competition. The competition started. The first guy dropped his leaf in merely 2 minutes. He was from the Inyazuka clan. More than half of the class dropped out within the first 4 minutes. Fujin could hear the groaning and upset voices from them. After 10 minutes, only 9 students were still competing. After 15 minutes, the only ones left were Suzuki Fujin, Hyuga Hana, Senju Teru, Shimura Nobu, and Uchiha Yuri. Right around that time, he heard Yuri groaning. He knew from the exercises conducted in class, that at max the others could go 20-odd minutes. Senju Teru dropped the leaf during the 19th minute, Nobu dropped it at the 21st minute, whereas Hana continued till the 22nd minute. Fujin decided to build up a decent lead for the points he'll be losing in the Taijutsu tournament. Wanting to stop around half an hour, he continued up to 33rd minute before intentionally making a mistake and dropping the leaf. Though he had outperformed his classmates, he wasn't that worried about attracting a lot of attention, as last year, Itaka didn't drop the leaf for freaking 2 hours. And there were rumors that he didn't drop it but was asked to stop performing it. On opening his eyes, he saw a few kids looking at him enviously, and Yuri nearly fuming at how outmatched he was in this competition. The next one was the shuriken throwing competition. Yuri, Teru, Nobu, Fujin, Hoka, and a couple more scored perfect in this competition. Looking at Yuri's fallen face, Fujin noted, "This competition is indeed unfair for him. From what I've seen, Yuri is able to hit a still target while he is moving very accurately. While he can also hit a moving target on a consistent basis, though not dead center. Sadly for him, the exam wasn't that difficult and hence many others were able to match him. If not, only Teru and maybe Nobu would have been able to match him." In the Taijutsu competition, Hyuga Hoka ranked first, followed by Teru and Hana. Fujin was ranked 4th and Yuri and Nobu were 5th and 6th respectively. Fujin had defeated Yuri in the quarterfinals. Admittedly, Yuri's technique was superior to Fujin's, however his physique was much weaker. However, in the semis, Fujin lost to Hoka, and in the fight to decide rank 3, he lost to Hana. He noted, "Damn, these Hyugas are tough to fight. Heck, pure Taijutsu competition against them is completely unfair." Even Teru, though he fought well with his Senju style, in the end he still lost. "If I meet these Hyugas in Chuyunin exams or somewhere, I'll be sure to pack a shitload of explosion tags to fight from far away." Hiruzen had visited to spectate the Taijutsu completion. Fujin did note that everyone was much fiercer during the Taijutsu competition, especially Hana. He wondered if that was because it was the exams, or because the Hokage was spectating. With all the exams completed, the teachers allowed the students a small break while they readied the final scores of everyone. Chapter 14, Results. While the teachers were calculating the final scores, all the students were waiting around in the training grounds. Fujin internally laughed while noticing, "Wow, some of them are so nervous, it's so cute, ha ha ha." Only the two yawning Naras and Teru looked calm. After adding up the scores and cross-checking, the teachers finally came back, led by the Hokage himself. Hiruzen gave another inspiring brainwashing speech while praising everyone for their efforts and the display of their talents. After his speech, Genki walked forward and displayed the results on a board. As Fujin expected, he was the one ranked first. The scores of top 5 were, Fujin, 100 plus 20 plus 30 plus 44 equals 194. Hana, 100 plus 13 plus 29 plus 46 equals 188. Teru, 96 plus 12 plus 30 plus 48 equals 186. Nobu, 98 plus 13 plus 30 plus 40 equals 181. Yuri, 95 plus 09 plus 30 plus 42 equals 176. Fujin, looking at his rank, was very satisfied. It was as he expected. However, on taking a deeper look and checking the scores in each individual category for him and others, he was a bit shocked. Damn. I'm ranked 1 only due to the leaf concentration competition. If I didn't build a huge lead there, then Hana would have outranked me and Teru would have been tied with me. I didn't expect anyone else to get a 100 in written exams. He exhaled a long breath of air in relief. I guess I have been incredibly lucky with the marking system of the leaf concentration competition. Chakra control is where I am much superior to these kids from the clans. But sadly for them, their specialties weren't marked in this manner. Yuri and Teru could have easily scored much more if the shuriken competition was made more difficult. Similarly, they'd have been much superior than everyone if ninjutsu was tested. After all, fireball jutsu is a rank C jutsu. I am sure Genki would have noticed this too. So next year, the marking scheme might be different. Perhaps other exams would be marked similar to the best scorer as well. He concluded his thoughts with, even though I ranked first, I still have much to work on. I shouldn't slack off. Instead, I should be intensifying my training. I'm sure these guys would be trained hard by their clans during the vacation. After coming out of his thoughts, he noticed those around himself. He noticed that Hana and Teru were looking at him with a very aggrieved look. As if he had done them a huge injustice. After a second he realized that they were probably mad due to the results of the leaf concentration competition. He just decided to ignore them. After displaying the results, Hiruzen wanted Genki to announce the prize. However, after looking at Genki, Hiruzen felt as if Genki was looking very grumpy. He began to guess what made him so irritated. Wondering if he could get to hear an interesting story. He decided to ask him later. Genki was really irritated. He thought, this brat. For 10 fucking months he didn't answer a single question in the class. Always seemed half distracted. Who knows what the fuck he does with his left hand always under his desk. The one time I tried to check, all I found was a lot of soil under his desk. And now he scores a perfect 100 on written exams. Don't tell me that after he goes home, all he does is study. Right then he felt like the Hokage was looking at him. Seeing Hokage looking at him, he understood what Hokage wanted and quickly announced, "All right everyone, be silent for a while." After getting the class's attention, he continued, "As I had told you guys on the first day, Lord Hokage would come here to watch your performance. However, there's an additional reward for the one who scores the highest in this exam. The best student can ask Lord Hokage for a reward." On hearing this, the civilian kids were surprised. While the kids from clans seemed to already know this. Genki announced loudly, "Suzuki Fujin, step forward." Fujin walked forward while thinking, I wonder what are the limits of the reward. Can I ask for private tutoring from him? Any forbidden or rank S jutsus? Or better yet, ask for the scroll of sealing. Hehe, I wonder what face he'd make if I asked for the scroll of sealing or something like Edo Tensei. Oh well, need to show proper respect now I guess. When Fujin reached in front of Hiruzen, he bowed respectfully. Seeing that, Hiruzen was very pleased. He smiled kindly and said, "You performed really well. I can see that you have worked really hard to be able to rank first in your class. The will of fire burns strong in you." Fujin thought sarcastically, "Yeah, right." Hiruzen continued, "Ask what reward you'd like." Fujin took a glance at Genki, and was a bit surprised at his irritated look. He then looked towards Hiruzen and respectfully said, "Lord Hokage, I would like to get seals that can replicate the effect weights have on our physique, but without any detrimental side effects." Hiruzen was a bit surprised by what Fujin asked for. However, he soon nodded and said, "All right. However, it will require some time to be prepared. I'll call you to my office when it is ready." Fujin tried to show a very happy and enthusiastic expression. He said in an excited manner, "Thank you very much, Lord Hokage." After that he retreated back among the kids. The exams were finally over. Fujin, who had already grown used to the new routine provided by Genki, would finally have better means to strengthen his physique. However, before they were dismissed, Genki announced that they would have a class tomorrow. Hearing that, most of the kids groaned. Students from other divisions already started their vacations 2 days back. Genki, however, tried his best to assure everyone that this will be the last class. Next day, everyone was present in the classroom. Genki arrived and the class greeted him. A few were still upset at being called for class. Genki started by saying, "Before we start, I have to say that I am very proud of your performance yesterday. Keep up your hard work and soon you all will be splendid shinobi." Hearing that calmed down the upset ones. He continued, "I hope that you guys continue your training in the vacation as well. As for today's class, don't worry, it'll be very exciting for you. I will be talking about what options are available to you guys in the future. That is what type of ninja you can become." After that, Genki started telling them what all options are there in the future. He started with the easiest one to understand, the medic nin. He explained what a medic ninja does and emphasized their importance in a squad. He even mentioned tsunade in order to increase the interest of his students. He followed it up with various other possibilities like assault ninja, tracking ninja, sensor ninja, hunter nin, infiltration ninja, communication ninja, and so on. He explained the benefits of each and every one of them as well as their restrictions and limitations as well as the risks associated. He also gave a good role model for each option. He also explained about specialising. He explained, genjutsu, taijutsu, various elemental ninjutsu, a ninja could become very powerful if specialized in one of these. But having basic capability for the rest is important too. Otherwise you will have a lot of weaknesses. He explained more about them. The lecture continued for 2 hours straight. Around 10 a.m., Genki finally ended his lecture. He said, "All right, with this now you are officially on your vacations." Fujin was very happy with this lecture. He thought, "Finally, I got a chance." Many students got very excited and started celebrating. However, Genki raised his voice and continued, "But, think about what we talked about today. Discuss it with your parents and decide the optimal way for you to train. If anyone has any doubts, they can consult me. I'll be in the staff room till noon." With that he finally ended his class. Many students just ran out of the class. Fujin instead went to the shuriken training ground and started practicing. After half an hour, he decided to visit Genki. On reaching the staff room, he knocked and entered after being permitted. Genki was the only teacher present. It made sense as vacations had started. Looking at Fujin, Genki was still irritated a bit. However, after a few seconds, he let out a sigh and thought, forget it. I guess he is just too reserved to actively participate in class. Fujin was puzzled by looking at Genki's sigh. He called him to get his attention, "Sensei." Genki replied, "So, what queries do you want to clear?" Fujin replied, "Sensei, could you update my workout routine again and also tell me more about those seals and how to use them?" Genki nodded and took a look at his workout routine again. After considering the addition of seals, he made a few changes to the routine and asked Fujin to follow them. He said, "All right, follow this plan, and if you get comfortable, you can increase the pressure that the seals can put on you. However, don't increase the pressure a lot or you can get injured and won't be able to practice for weeks." Fujin nodded, "Thank you, Sensei." However, he still stood there and asked something Genki would have never guessed. He said, "Sensei, I thought about the roles you mentioned during the lecture. And I'm really interested in being a censor. So can you tell how I should train for it?" Genki was really surprised by this request. Not able to understand the reason, he asked, "Why do you want to become a censor?" Fujin replied confidently, "Sensei, if an enemy sneaks up on me or my team in the future, being a censor would help me save all of us. Also, I'll be able to detect enemies from far away and prevent us from falling into any ambush. That's why I wanted to become a censor." After finishing, Fujin smirked internally. Genki was surprised a bit by the answer. All the stuff that Fujin just said was what he himself had said in class. He thought, no wonder he scored full in written exams. But still, something doesn't add up. He seems a bit too interested in becoming a censor. It's not something that can happen in merely 2 hours. It's as if he knew about censors beforehand. He asked, "Since when did you want to become a censor ninja?" Fujin wasn't ignorant of the fact that Genki could have found this request a bit suspicious. He acted to show that he was nervous, and said, I wasn't aware of censor ninjas until today's lecture." He then sheepishly rubbed the back of his head while saying, "However, I was thinking along those lines from the day you snuck up on me in the library. If it was an enemy, he could have killed me without me even knowing what happened." Genki was stunned by the reply. I never thought that a simple incident as that had such an impact on him. And that was merely his first day. Sigh. Whatever, I guess I'm the one to blame for this obsession of his. He then replied, "I am not a censor, so I won't be able to help you with this." Hearing that, he saw a dejected look at Fujin. Fujin was thinking, oh please, not another trick again. I don't want to wait till next year's final exam. However, Genki had good news for Fujin. He continued, "However, I have a good friend who is a censor and is in the censor division of Konoha. I'll ask him to train you over the vacation. I hope you don't have any other plans for the vacation." Fujin put up an excited expression, while thinking, oh, I do have a lot of plans, not just for the vacation but also for the next year or two, and said, "No sensei," in an excited manner. Genki smiled and said that he'll pick up Fujin tomorrow at 8 a.m. Fujin then took his leave. Chapter 15, Censor. Next morning, Genki showed up at Fujin's house at 8 a.m. After picking him up, they went to a training ground. Fujin saw that a middle-aged man, probably in late 20s or early 30s, was waiting. He noticed that the man had Yamanaka crest on him. He thought, should have guessed. In Konoha, they are the best censors. Genki approached him and said, "Yo. This is the kid I was talking about. Fujin, he is Shin. He was my classmate. He is a special jounin. He'll be giving you tips on how to become a censor. He may seem grumpy at times, but don't worry, he is a very kind person." Fujin nodded, "Good morning Shin-sensei." He noted that Shin, who was already looking a bit mad at Genki's introduction, seemed even more grumpy after he greeted him. Shin angrily said, "Damn you Genki. Not only do you give such a shit introduction but now are also trying to pull me into being a sensei." He then looked at Fujin strictly and said, "Kiddo, don't ever call me sensei." Fujin wondered, why is everyone so strange, while Genki asked mockingly, "Damn, why do you have to be so grumpy so early in the day?" Fujin acted to show he was nervous and asked, "So what do I call you?" Shin thought for a few seconds, and then put up a smile on his face, with his eyes almost sparkling, and said, "Call me Shin Aniki." His face looked borderline creepy. Fujin's expression immediately became entirely plain and almost blurted out, "Why don't I call you old geezer?" Genki face-palmed and scolded, "Stop being creepy. Let him call you sensei." Shin sighed in disappointment and replied, "All right, leave it." Then looking at Fujin he said, "All right kiddo, first let's see how talented you are in becoming a censor. If your talent is very poor, then I won't be teaching you and you shouldn't waste your time on it either." He first lectured Fujin a bit about what censors do and how. Then instructed Fujin to sit in a meditative pose and told him how to sense his chakra field. It took nearly half an hour for Fujin to sense his chakra field. The instructions were very helpful. Shin then tested Fujin's chakra field a bit. After some testing, he concluded that Fujin's chakra field had a radius of 7.3 meters. Shin commented, 7.3 meters, not bad. An average ninja has a chakra field of 4 to 5 meters. In my Yamanaka clan, we train our youngsters in becoming a censor if their chakra field exceeds 7 meters, while for other Konoha shinobi, the minimum requirement is 5.9 meters. However, that is just the bare minimum. Quite a few in the Yamanaka clan had their chakra field exceed 10 meters before they started training to become a censor. I myself had a radius of 10.6 meters. So while you can become a censor, you'll have to do a lot of hard work. So are you sure you still wanted to train to become a censor? Fujin processed all the information quickly and nodded. Shin said, "All right, I'll guide you. However, the process of training to become a censor is quite complicated. We will need proper training facilities. I'll take you to the place where Konoha censors are trained. You will start visiting there daily at 10:30 a.m. from tomorrow onwards." Genki nodded at his former classmate. He looked at Fujin and informed, "Lord Hokage will have your seals ready by tomorrow. Report to his office tomorrow at 6 p.m. Fujin nodded and said, "Thank you sensei." He then accompanied Shin to the training facility. The location was slightly away from the residential areas. It was in the middle of one of the many forests in Konoha. Fujin memorized the location and then took his leave. Next day, Fujin reached the training facility at 10:28 a.m. He saw that Shin was already there. On entering, Fujin saw that there were a lot of rooms in the facility. The facility was mostly empty with very few people actually being there. However, Fujin noted that quite a few rooms were occupied. Shin said, "These rooms isolate everything outside it. And also have seals that can eliminate all sound and smell in the room." So you'll have to entirely be dependent on your ability to sense. Fujin paid attention while Shin was explaining it. He thought, I see, this makes sense. I suppose this is where most of Konoha's sensors train. I guess other trainees are occupying other rooms. I don't recall properly, but I think Konoha also had a facility that aided it to monitor the whole border of the village to look for intruders or something along those lines. Though it was only shown in Shippuden and not in Part 1. I wonder if that facility is also in here, or is it someplace elsewhere? Shin led Fujin in one of the rooms. The room was very dark. All walls were painted black. The room was pretty big too. On entering, Shin explained Fujin how to train to be able to sense with only the help of his chakra. He said, a blindfold will be placed on you, and after the seals are activated, all sound and smell in the room will be eliminated. After that, a few objects will be placed in the room. These objects have a small amount of chakra sealed within them in a manner that it can be detected by sensors. So your job will be to detect these objects. We will start by placing the object 3 meters from you, and later increase the range to 5 meters and then to 7 meters. Once you are done with it, then I'll teach you how to increase the size of your chakra field. Fujin understood and thanked him. He started the training. The training continued till 12:30 with him having no success at all. At that time, Shin ended the training. He said that they'll daily train here for 2 hours and also gave him a few tips in order to make some progress. He also had a few words of encouragement for Fujin as he said that these things can't be sensed in a day and to not get very upset. He also provided Fujin with a small cubical object. He said, this is one of the objects that I had asked you to sense. You can temporarily borrow this to practice at home. Though you won't be able to block your sense of smell and sound, however it shouldn't matter much as you don't specialize in either of those. So just try to practice with your blindfold on. Maybe ask someone else to place the square down somewhere after you have put the blindfold and sat in your meditative posture. That way you won't know where exactly the cube is beforehand. However, don't practice for very long. Fujin understood all what Shin said and nodded. He then thanked Shin and left for his home. With the academy over, he now had 7 additional hours he could use for training. The training at the facility, traveling to and fro and lunch took slightly less than 3 hours. Fujin allotted all the remaining 4 hours for chakra sensing training temporarily. In the Hokage office, Hiruzen looked at the custom-made seals on his desk. He sighed softly while thinking, Konoha's edge in Fuinjutsu is fading fast. With the annihilation of the Uzumaki clan and the passing away of Mito-sama, our progress in Fuinjutsu had almost come to a standstill. Kushina and Minato had just started to make progress, but they died too young. Now it almost took 2 whole days to get such a simple seal custom made for Fujin. The request is still quite surprising though. Genki did say that the kid was diligent, but asking for such seals at such a young age is incredibly rare. Only a few geniuses among the clans usually train with this. However, even they start at a later age in most cases. I do recall him glancing at Genki first before asking for the prize. I guess Genki was the one who suggested the idea to him. I guess I should have a nice chat with him when he visits me in a few hours. At 6 p.m., Fujin reached Hokage office and entered after knocking. He greeted respectfully while bowing his head slightly, "Good evening, Lord Hokage." Hiruzen was impressed by it. He thought, well, at least his manners are very good. He said, "Look up. Here are the seals you requested." This seal is a special seal designed by our village. It combines the features of a few basic seals in order to create a perfect tool to help train the bodies of our shinobi. You can manipulate the amount of pressure the seal puts on your body freely. The pressure is applied on the whole body. Fujin nodded and said, "Thank you, Lord Hokage." He then looked at the seal placed in front of him. The seal was engraved on a square-shaped paper. He thought, there is just one seal. I thought that there would be 4 or more seals to be applied on various parts of the body like the forelimbs and so on. I guess the seal is much more advanced. Sigh, I can't analyze the seal then. Still, it's better that I have to place the seal on myself and no one else has to make the seal on my body. This way the chances of someone creating issues will probably be lower. That said, I'm not supposed to know much about Fuinjutsu. He then looked up at Hokage, and asked, Lord Hokage, how do I use the seal? Hiruzen replied, just place the seal on your chest. It should stick to your body. The seal is reusable, so you can remove it and put it again if you ever wanted to. But don't ever give the seal to anyone else. Fujin replied, yes, Lord Hokage. But how do I increase or decrease the pressure caused by the seal? Also, how much pressure can be applied by the seal? Hiruzen chuckled at the curiosity of the youngster in front of him. He replied, just focus your chakra on the seal. It's similar to how you focus chakra on the leaf during leaf concentration exercise. Then you can decide whether to increase or decrease the pressure and it'll be done automatically. As for the maximum pressure, it can apply a lot. It is equivalent to wearing a body vest of 100 kilograms, 50 kilograms weights on each leg and 25 kilograms weights on each arm. Fujin was shocked with those numbers. He nearly cursed out, bastard, shouldn't you say that first? However, he maintained control of his emotions. In order to keep up his act, he gulped and showed a bit of fear on his face. Hiruzen looked at Fujin's expression and smirked internally, thinking, well, this will ensure that he always uses that seal very carefully and doesn't harm himself with it. After that, Hiruzen talked a bit with Fujin. He tried to understand what caused Fujin to require these seals. He also asked about his daily life, whether his apartment is comfortable, whether he ate properly and so on. He also made Fujin try controlling the pressure in his presence. He also explained some tips and precautions. For instance, he said that while sleeping, Fujin should always deactivate the seal. He also cautioned Fujin against using the seal while sparring or fighting, saying, if you get used to it, then you will find it hard to properly control your movements when you deactivate the seal. At the end, he praised Fujin's performance in the exams and let him go. After leaving, Fujin thought, 250 kilograms, huh? I really want to know if anyone actually uses it all. I do wonder how much weight Lee carried. The number was never mentioned in the series. While leaving the Hokage office, Fujin had already activated the seal. In front of Hiruzen, he kept the pressure very low. However, after leaving the Hokage building, he increased the pressure. He increased it to a level where it put a decent amount of strain on his body, while still being able to bear it. He ran all the way to his home and thought, finally, even this simple run was a challenge. Though I will probably have to reduce the pressure a bit in order to be able to complete the workout routine Genki provided. I suppose I'll have to test for a few days in order to get the pressure right. I can track my progress too, as I will know the percentage of max pressure applied by the seal. He also thought about what all Hiruzen told him and focused on 2 points. He specified to not use the seal while sleeping and fighting. I suppose not following the first one ain't an option. As for second, I can understand his point of view and concerns. If I do it, then trying to fight without that pressure will cause plenty of issues. Of course they can be fixed with some work, however if in the middle of a fight, It'll be deadly. However, Kaguya did have a high gravity dimension. So I should try to learn to fight under high pressure too. But there's no need to do it now. Maybe later on I could build a gravity chamber and practice there. That might be more effective. Still, I gotta admit that the seal is very good. It applies pressure throughout my body. The pressure on my legs is more than on my arms. Even my back feels the strain. I guess the seal is made in a way that every muscle is properly exercised, which would result in proper development of the whole body. There won't be any cases of some muscles being developed more and others being underdeveloped. I guess Hiruzen left out the specifics, not expecting me to understand them. This method is much superior to the weights Lee used. I guess I really need to be thankful to Genki. Though, this does make me wonder why these guys haven't given the seal to every Konoha shinobi. Is it that hard to produce? Ending his train of thoughts, Fujin started to meditate. Chapter 16, Second Academic Year. Over the next few days, Fujin experimented with the pressure applied by the seal. He turned 7-year-old as well. It took him 4 days to be able to figure out the amount of pressure he could be under and still complete his workout. It was slightly over 2% of the seal's max capacity. He thought, wow, that's very low. Then again, I'm barely 7 years old now. Anyways, at least my physique should develop faster now. His sensor training continued as well. It took him 8 days to finally be able to sense the objects placed around him. Yamanaka Shin was a bit disappointed by the progress. He sighed and thought, 8 days, while it ain't bad, it's not very good either. He probably won't be able to be an exceptional sensor. Though with some work, he could be a decent one. While the time is slightly better than the average of other Konoha sensors, it lacks when compared to sensors from my clan. On average, we are able to sense the object on the 7th day, and the more talented ones do it even faster. Oh well, Konoha does severely lack sensors. Due to the existence of Hyuga, Abarame, and Inyazuka clans, the village didn't really invest much into training sensors. Majority of Konoha's sensors come from my clan. Having another sensor, even just an average one, will be good for the village. After that, Shin moved the objects away from Fujin and placed them 4 to 5 meters away. As the basics were the same and the objects were still in his chakra field, he was able to sense it very quickly in less than half an hour. Shin was surprised by the speed. He moved the objects 7 meters away, and the same thing repeated. This surprised Shin a lot. Well, this is surprising. Though on average a Yamanaka senses the objects on the 7th day, sensing after moving it away takes some time, with most going into the 8th day and a few even to the 9th day. I guess he has more talent than I thought. Fujin's thoughts were, while it did take a long time to detect it, to detect after increasing range wasn't tough. The principles were the same and the object was still in my chakra field. I guess the next training would be to increase the size of my chakra field. He sighed slightly, thinking, I hope the training for it isn't as boring as this one. After the training was done, Shin said to Fujin, not bad, you have progressed faster than I thought. Over the next 4 days, keep practicing the same at your home, so that you get more comfortable with sensing chakras in your field. I'll be out on a mission, so I won't meet you. Once I return, we will start training to increase the radius of your chakra field. Fujin thanked him and left. The next couple of months went in a similar manner. The training for increasing the chakra field included even longer hours of meditation. He had to focus on one point and try to increase the range in that direction. Fujin thought, this is gonna take a long time. I guess over the vacation, I should work on being able to train while also keeping my eyes open instead of putting up a blindfold. That way I can train for this in the class too. Otherwise, there will be no hope of continuing this training after academy restarts. Over the vacation, he kept up his physical workouts, which produced great results thanks to the seal. He also trained a lot in the substitution jutsu. His goal was to reduce the time required to perform it and also reduce the number of required hand signs from 5 to 0. While he didn't make any progress on reducing the number of hand signs, he was able to perform it much faster, being able to do it in less than a second. Though he wasn't sure of the exact time due to having no instruments to measure it. For clone jutsu, he was able to create 3 clones, which if he recalled correctly, was the requirement for the genin graduation exam. Transformation jutsu was progressing well too, as no one was able to see any issue with him when he was roaming in the streets while being transformed into others. But he hadn't yet tested it against someone who knew him. As for chakra control, he became capable of running freely on water surfaces. So he reduced the time allotted to it and only practiced it twice a week instead of daily. While he had some ideas to improve his chakra control even further, he decided to try them later so as to be able to focus more on ninjutsu. The wind nature transformation training had taken a step back as Fujin felt that he had trained enough for it. He thought, being able to cut a stone was probably on par with being able to cut a waterfall. Even on the metal, I'm able to leave small scratches on the surface. As for earth training, he had bought more clay to work on molding it and had also brought a small 1-foot rock in his home, which he attempted to crumble after being bored of sensor training. As for sensor training, after teaching Fujin how to increase the radius of his chakra field, the meetings with Shin were reduced to only twice a week. When the vacation ended, Fujin was able to instantly sense chakra if anyone stepped in his chakra field, unless that person had hidden his chakra. However, he had to actively focus to do that. If he didn't focus, then he wasn't able to sense anyone. However, he noticed that he was able to passively sense chakra in 0.6 meter radius around himself. Shin said that this was something every sensor developed over time, and was very important as this didn't require attention and the sensor could do other tasks simultaneously. His radius of chakra field increased to over 4 times of its initial size to slightly over 30 meters. Shin was quite impressed with the pace of his improvement. Shin also taught Fujin to be able to measure the amount of chakra in the ninjas in his chakra field. He explained its uses in identifying the threat level. But he also explained to not be entirely reliant on it as the amount of chakra can be hidden as well. He demonstrated to Fujin as to how he could reduce his chakra that others can sense, or even completely hide it to appear as a common civilian. Shin taught the same to Fujin too. Fujin had some success in hiding his chakra completely, though it wasn't perfect yet. However, trying to reduce it and putting up a facade of having a lower chakra level was very difficult as his chakra would fluctuate a lot. On the other hand, Fujin was able to sense chakra without restricting any of his senses or without having to use the hand sign or even while moving around. However, without the hand sign, the radius of the chakra field used to reduce to around 25 meters, and while moving around, it went down to merely 17 meters. It showed that he still had a lot of work to do. On the last day of vacation, Shin said, "You have improved a lot. In the future you can easily become a good sensor with some more training. So keep working on it. We won't have any more training sessions, but feel free to approach me if you have anything to clarify." Fujin thanked him for all his help over the past 2 months and took his leave. He also returned the chakra objects that he had borrowed. Fujin was really grateful to him. Though Fujin's capabilities as a sensor were still very poor, in the past 2 months, Shin had drilled all the basics of being a sensor into him. Now he merely needed to put more efforts into becoming a good sensor. The new year in the academy finally started. Genki was again our class teacher. Fujin guessed that he'll be the class teacher until they became genin. The new year started with another brainwashing lecture. Fujin, not wanting to waste any time, employed the art he had mastered in his previous life and remastered in this one, the art of faking attention in a lecture. He moved his attention to his chakra field. His plan was to focus on increasing the radius of his chakra field. But upon sensing others, he decided to compare everyone's chakra levels first. After noticing everyone's chakra levels, he concluded, "Wow, my chakra reserves are really very good. The efforts taken over the previous year and half have really been very fruitful. It's good to finally be able to see the results of my efforts." As for others, Fujin noted that on average the chakra levels of the civilian students, and students from Nara, Yamanaka, Kato, Heitake, Sarutobi, and Kurama clans is lower than others. Comparatively, students from Hyuga, Akimichi, Inyazuka, Abarame, and Uchiha clans have slightly more chakra. In all, Uchiha Yori's chakra is the 6th highest in the class, while Hyuga Hoka ranks 7th. While that was what he expected, the one with the 5th highest chakra surprised him. He thought, now that's surprising. The 5th highest chakra level is of Shimura Nobu. I guess Danzo really has a proper training system for kids from his clan. As for the ones at the top, there was no surprise. He thought, sigh, these senjus are really blessed with high chakra reserves. Even the two who aren't that talented have their chakra reserves almost 50% greater than that of Yuri. Whereas Teru's chakra reserves are more than twice that of Yuri. It's even larger than mine. Anyways, the chakra levels of everyone is just as expected. Only Nobu was an exception. Which implies that they haven't started to do any training to increase their reserves. Makes sense though, as they are only 7 years old. Anyways, if he doesn't focus on increasing his chakra level, I should be able to increase my chakra reserves to become larger than Teru's. He then tried to measure the chakra level of Genki. On measuring it, he thought, I see, his and Shin's chakra reserves are very similar to each other. I guess there isn't much difference between an elite Chuunin and a special Jounin. It's just that a special Jounin has a skill that is at Jounin level, while the rest of his skills are only at elite Chuunin level. For Shin, it is his capabilities as a sensor. I gotta agree that becoming a sensor is very convenient. Unless the ones being sensed are sensors too, there's little chance of anyone realizing that they are being sensed. Though I suppose all of the cage level ninjas would have mastered this to a certain extent. Oh well, it's not like I'm planning to hunt any cages. Anyways, enough with this class. I should check the ones from other classes, especially the ones who will be becoming genin this year. While the 25-meter radius of my chakra field is pretty insignificant in an open field, in a compact building, it covers a lot. With those thoughts, he started to focus on chakras outside his classroom. He first observed the classroom in which he had seen Daisuke run in. Noticing the chakra levels of the students there, he observed that they were really low. He then focused on the room where he knew the classes for senior-most batches happen. He measured their chakras. He observed that there were a few with really pitiful chakra levels. He guessed that most of them won't become genin. On average, however, their chakra level was only 20% higher than Teru's. Though there were a few having much higher chakra levels. Fujin guessed that those kids were from the Senju clan too. Fujin concluded, I see. I suppose by the end of this academic year, my chakra reserves should become high enough and could be considered genin level. And I know all the 3 basic jutsus too. So in terms of chakra and ninjutsu, I should reach genin level in a year. Even taijutsu should reach that stage in less than 2 years. But that won't be enough to actually pass the graduation exam. The graduation exam has so much more than just taijutsu and ninjutsu. There's training on moving stealthily, setting up an encampment, incapacitating a target, freeing yourself if you are captured, using a first aid kit, even hunting. Cleaning and cooking a wild animal, and a lot more that will be taught in the academy. Without all that knowledge and training, becoming a ninja might well be suicide. Not to mention, actually trying to graduate so early would be stupid. Itachi was a different case. He is the son of the Uchiha patriarch. I, on the other hand, am merely an orphan. It would attract a lot of unwanted attention. In addition, just from the point of view of ninjutsu, I still have so much more to learn. I still have to learn a few more basic jutsus like body flicker, and not to mention I still have to learn wind and earth style jutsus. Apart from that, I'm almost entirely blank when it comes to genjutsu and have a lot to learn in kenjutsu. So there's no point in graduating until I have gained everything I could from the academy. If I ever reach a point where I can't make much progress due to being in the academy, then I'll consider graduating early. After considering all that, Fujin finally focused on increasing the radius of his chakra field. The remaining lecture went in a similar boring manner. However, at the end of the lecture Genki said something that excited some of his fellow students. He said, "This year, we will start learning ninjutsu." Chapter 17, Body Flicker. Fujin wasn't surprised by that news. He had already gathered enough information about the academy in the previous year. For normal students, the ninjutsu training began in their 3rd year. However, for the elite batches, it began in their 2nd year. Having already learned the 3 basic jutsus, he wasn't much interested in the news. Though he did have a concern, he thought, I'll have to hide the fact that I can use these jutsus. I'll need to learn how to fail at these jutsus. And have to do it in a manner that doesn't give me any bad habits. I suppose I could just make hand signs without molding my chakra, or maybe mold chakra for a few of the hand signs without molding it for one. I'll have to test that first. When around 7 to 8 are able to perform the jutsu, I'll show that I have just managed to do them too. In the first week, Genki just revised what they had learned in the previous year and tested all the students. However, seeing the progress of some of the students had left Fujin speechless. Genki too was surprised, but it was a joyous surprise for him. In the leaf concentration exercise, Hana, Teru, and Nobu, all were able to hold the leaf for more than half an hour. While Yuri and Hoka exceeded 25 minutes. Fujin had dropped his leaf after 36 minutes, in order to not attract any suspicion. His thoughts were, damn. If they keep up this competitive nature, they may well reach beyond 1 hour by the end of this year. While it's reasonable to expect me to keep up, I should instead show that I've slacked off and not made much progress. While Genki might get a bit suspicious, if he ever asks me, I'll just say I felt bad for them and am letting them win. Genki was very impressed too. He thought, 4 kids were able to stick the leaf for over half an hour, another 2 should be able to reach that in another couple of months. This batch is good. I guess that Fujin brat spurred them all on. They might actually be able to do tree climbing and even water walking before they graduate. Oh, this is so nice, I could get a huge bonus from the Hokage. The shuriken competition didn't give much insights on their growth, as many were already doing very well in the previous year. The taijutsu tournament, however, didn't show that much improvement for everyone. Among the ones at the top, only Yuri and Nobu made significant progress. Fujin guessed that it was only because of his performance in the leaf concentration exam that made everyone focus a lot on it. However, the Inyazukas were performing much better than last year and were very aggressive too. Due to the poor scores of all 3 Inyazukas in the exams, they were given some special training by their clan in order to not embarrass the clan any further. In one of the spars, one Inyazuka kid screamed, "I'll defeat you no matter what. There's no way I will go through that training in my clan ever again." Hearing that, the other 2 Inyazuka students winced. Fujin, getting a hint of what would have happened, thought, "This world is in a severe need of laws punishing child abuse." Sadly for that Inyazuka student, he still got mercilessly beaten into the ground by Nobu, which made everyone feel pity for the poor kid. The Taijutsu tournament, however, did provide Fujin with the opportunity to finally test his progress. And he was very pleased with the results. After deactivating the seals, his body moved a lot faster. And his blows carried more weight. He tied against Teru in their match. After the first week was done, Fujin entered the library and went into section D. He thought, "I've probably tried the substitution jutsu over 1,000 times. I'm still not able to reduce the hand signs needed for it. Honestly, jutsu is almost completely useless against ninjas if you have to make those hand signs. Even a random genin would be able to identify the jutsu and be on alert. Though I guess it might still work on normal bandits. Anyways, I guess I'll need a few years to be able to reduce the number of hand signs needed. So let's just move on to a new jutsu." He quickly started searching for the jutsu he wanted to learn. He was quite excited to learn it as it was one of his favorites. On finding it, he read out softly, "The body flicker jutsu." He found a place to sit, and read the scroll. After reading and analyzing it, he concluded, this jutsu can be called both easy and complicated at the same time. It's easy as there is only one hand sign required. The tiger seal. So the way of molding chakra is very simple. And it's complicated as actually performing this technique is quite difficult. I would have to focus a lot of chakra in my legs to be able to move at such high speeds. According to the scroll, initially I'll only be able to flicker a few meters away. Only when I'm able to flicker a 100 meters away would I be considered to have learned this jutsu. It is also mentioned to use something like smoke or leaves just before using this jutsu so that the enemy doesn't understand the direction in which you flicker to. Also, it is very important to ensure not to run into someone or something while using this jutsu. I suppose me being a sensor might help a bit in this regard. However, there's no such thing as the maximum distance one can flicker away. Instead, it is the amount of time you can sustain this jutsu. I thought that I'll need to learn to be able to flicker many times consecutively if I want the help of this jutsu to be able to escape. However, instead it is the amount of time you can maintain this jutsu. So if I'm able to flicker 100 meter away in a second and am able to sustain this jutsu for 10 seconds, I'll be able to run a kilometer away. But this is good, I suppose. It's more convenient than having to flicker again and again. After learning the whole process from the scroll, Fujin left the library. He transformed into a random 13-year-old stranger in an empty alleyway. And then ran into a nearby mini forest. He then ran around in that mini forest while trying to sense if any chakra is present around him. After that he thought, alright, this forest is clear. Also I'm under a disguise. So I can start training. While a forest isn't the best place to train body flicker, but, since the amount of distance I can flicker initially will be low, there shouldn't be an issue. Though I'll need to train in open spaces once I start to flicker long distances away. And he started training for this jutsu. The months went on in a peaceful manner for Fujin. His physique kept improving due to the seal. He used to increase the pressure of the seal by 0.1% from time to time. In the academy, Genki started ninjutsu with the transformation technique. Fujin had experimented and found it easy to fake hand signs without molding his chakra. However, he felt that it was wasteful. So he tried another trick. He started faking the first hand sign, but while changing the hand sign to the second seal, he used to try to mold the chakra for the first seal without the aid of the first hand sign. In this manner, he practiced to do those jutsus with one hand sign less. As expected, Teru and Yuri were the most talented in ninjutsu. They competed for the top 2 spots. Nobu, no matter how hard he tried, only ranked 3rd. Hoka, Hana, and the Abarame Kid competed for ranks 4 to 6. Fujin ranked himself 10th in transformation jutsu, 7th in clone jutsu and 8th in substitution jutsu. It took him a month to be able to do the body flicker jutsu despite learning the way to mold chakra within just 3 days. Even then, he was only able to flicker for a few meters. Over the next month, instead of trying to increase the range, he instead worked on increasing the speed of performing the jutsu, and also managed to pull it off without using any hand signs. In a single month, he probably practiced that jutsu thousands of times to be able to do that. Next, he worked on increasing the range of the jutsu. It took him 4.5 months in all to reach 100 meters with body flicker. He then started focusing on sustaining the body flicker for a longer period. Sometime around this time, the incident of Kumo trying to kidnap Hinata and the death of Hisashi happened. Both Hoka and Hana were very solemn the next day. In order to properly measure his progress, he bought a stopwatch. After 6 months, he was able to flicker 400 meters away in less than 4 seconds. After that, he thought, my original plan was to start with elemental jutsu by now, but body flicker does have more applications I want to explore. Sigh, let's stick to it. Mastering body flicker to a high degree will be extremely essential later on. He continued with his body flicker training. By the time the exams for 2nd year were up, Fujin had managed to sustain his body flicker for 12.76 seconds and managed to cover 1.9 kilometers. He could also change the direction midway, though he couldn't do it very frequently, and could also perform flicker while in a forest and having to avoid running into a tree. He was extremely pleased with his progress. Over at the academy, he had managed to reduce the hand signs required for transformation and clone jutsus by 1, and for substitution jutsu, he was close to reducing it by 2. His chakra field had increased a lot during this year. Its radius had increased to 180 meters. Without the hand sign it reached 162 meters, and while running at normal speed, it could reach 135 meters. His chakra reserves too had grown exponentially. Physical training and meditation itself were a huge boost. On top of it, he had practiced body flicker till he dropped on a daily basis. He had performed body flicker for tens of thousands of times over the past 9 months. His reserves now exceeded Teru's. On comparing it with the senior-most batch, he noticed that his reserves would be well above average in that class, probably entering top 10. Only 2 students, probably from the Senju clan, exceed him considerably. Even then, he was sure that in another year, he would surpass their current chakra level. He thought, I guess it's time to ask Hiruzen for the Shadow Clone Jutsu. A/N, I would like to clarify the Shadow Clone Jutsu a bit. Shadow Clone Jutsu isn't a forbidden jutsu, it's merely a B-rank jutsu which jounins can learn easily. In Naruto, it was shown that a genin Konohamaru was able to perform shadow clones and use Raise Nan on one of the pains. Even Kiba, while being a Chuunin, was able to perform a shadow clone. The jutsu in the Forbidden Scroll of Sealing was the multi-shadow clone jutsu. This is the one which Naruto spams and Kakashi had used to scare/bluff away Gato's thugs. So I'll follow this pattern, Someone with Genin level chakra can create 1 to 2 shadow clones. With Chuyunin level chakra can create 3 to 5 shadow clones, and with a Jounin level chakra can create more than 5 shadow clones. The increase in his chakra level could be seen when he was finally able to burst the rubber ball, finally making progress in the stage 2 of Raise Non training. However, he was only barely able to burst it. He still needed more chakra to be able to actually perform Raise Non. His skill at throwing shurikens had increased too. He was now able to hit the board while running around and was also able to hit a moving board. In order to allow students to practice that, a board used to be suspended from a tree branch and moved. It worked like a pendulum. However, he still struggled to hit a moving board while he was running himself. Fujin decided that after he managed to do that, he'll start practicing to hit his clones with shuriken, as that would replicate battle scenarios even better. Something that Fujin gained while practicing in the many forests in Konoha was shurikens and kunaus lying around. He had found 23 shuriken and 11 kunau. However, 7 shuriken and 4 kunau were very badly damaged, leaving him with 16 shuriken and 7 kunau. He handled them with extreme care, not touching any directly, in case they were coated with poison. He thought, well, this is convenient. Though these are used weapons, they are still very usable. However, I need to wash them properly in order to remove any sense of previous users and in case there's any poison applied on them. Still, I've been in these forests for so long and only found so few of these. I guess everyone collects them back after using them, as they aren't cheap. Maybe others like me too roam around trying to find them. He sighed, whatever, these many should be enough for me to practice. And soon, it was time for the second year exams. Chapter 18, Second Year Exams. As Fujin had expected, the whole marking system for their class had been revamped. He wondered if the same also happened for other elite batches. As for the overall exams, the written exam had 100 points, leaf concentration competition had 20 points, shuriken throwing competition had 20 points, each of the 3 ninjutsu had 10 points each. And the taijutsu tournament had 30 points. In the written exam, he noticed that it had 5 divisions among itself, each being more difficult than the previous. While it wasn't very hard for him, he had no doubt that 8-year-olds from his previous world wouldn't even pass this exam. Seeing how difficult the exam was, he purposefully made a mistake in 2 questions worth 2 marks each. For leaf concentration, the same marking system as the previous year followed. Yori, Hoka, crossed 45 minutes, Nobu dropped at 56th minute, Teru at 59th minute. Hana crossed 1 hour and held it for another 4 minutes. Fujin, knowing that the written exam this year was tougher and not expecting anyone to score full, dropped his leaf after 1 hour 11 minutes. The shuriken exam also had multiple layers like the written exam. The first was to throw 8 shurikens at a stationary target board. The second was to run alternately to the right and left to a circle drawn on the ground and throw from the circle while running. The third was to hit at the target board that was hanging and swinging like a pendulum. Each of these stages were worth 4 points each. The last stage, worth 8 points, had white plates being launched in the air by Genki. The plates were spinning incredibly fast, causing them to not move at a set path and deviating slightly. Yori, Teru, Fujin, Nobu, Hoka scored max in the first 3 rounds. Hana struggled in the second round, while scoring full in first and third. The fourth round, however, was tough. 19 students didn't manage to hit even one. And 6, including Hana, managed to hit just one. Fujin guessed that most of them just scored a lucky hit. Fujin had been observing the plates all the time to try and see a pattern in them. He got some hints, but not enough, and it resulted in him wishing, damn, if only I had a Sharingan. Hoka and Fujin just hit 2. Nobu hit 3 plates, Teru managed to hit 4 and Yuri managed to hit 7 of the 8 plates thrown by Genki. Fujin was quite impressed by Yuri's performance, especially considering that he hadn't yet awakened his Sharinans. After the competition, Yuri returned to his smug self. In ninjutsu exams, transformation and substitution jutsu were analyzed and marked by Genki. For clone jutsu, they were marked depending upon the maximum number of acceptable clones anyone made. Teru made 5 clones and looking at his chakra, Fujin was confident no one else would exceed him. So he created 4 clones. Fujin hid his skills in this exam as he knew that Hana wasn't very good in this aspect and no one apart from her would come close to his score in written exams. The Taijutsu tournament was similar to the previous year. Only major differences being the Inyazukas performing much better and Fujin having a much stronger body. Right now he could have the seal apply 5.3% of its max pressure. It had improved his physique a lot. He trashed through the majority of his opponents. This time, he ran into Teru in the semifinals and managed to beat him. While Hoka beat Hana in his fight. Yuri beat Nobu for rank 5, whereas Teru beat Hana for rank 3. Against Hoka, the fight was very intense. To Fujin's surprise, his advantage in physique wasn't that great. In the end, he still lost to Hoka. He thought, is he too using seals or something similar to strengthen his body? His performance in ninjutsu isn't as good as his taijutsu, and it's better to not talk of his performance in written exams looking at previous year's scores. Sigh, I guess all he does is train in taijutsu. And my main focus has been on ninjutsu. Little wonder that I can't beat him. After the scores were tallied, the results of the top 5 were: Fujin, 96 plus 20 plus 14 plus 23 plus 29 equals 182. Teru, 81 plus 17 plus 16 plus 30 plus 28 equals 172. Nobu, 86 plus 16 plus 15 plus 28 plus 25 equals 170. Hana, 91 plus 18 plus 12 plus 21 plus 27 equals 169. Yuri, 79 plus 14 plus 19 plus 28 plus 26 equals 166. After looking at the results, Genki thought, this is pretty similar to last year. Only difference is that instead of the leaf concentration competition, Fujin built his lead in the written exam. How much does this kid study exactly? The last 20 marks were quite tough to get. As for the rest, Teru was the one who performed the best overall. Except for the written exam, he is in the top 3 of every exam. Leaf concentration competition is still dominated by Fujin. But with the performance of the others, I can start tree walking exercise next year. In the shuriken throwing competition, Yuri was in a league of his own. Same with Hoka in the taijutsu tournament. Though that seal did help Fujin a lot. I guess I should suggest to Teru's parents to get that seal for him as well. It will help him a lot. In ninjutsu, Teru, Yuri, and Nobu are all excellent. Just that Teru has more chakra than the other two. And I'm pretty sure that they do know more jutsus as well. This class has performed really well. The top 8 to 12 students are all very good. Lord Third should be very happy with their performance. After he was done thinking, he put up the results on display. Looking at it, everyone had mixed reactions. Since the exam markings were made to ensure that the ones who perform well stand out, the ones who didn't work hard scored very low. A few still struggled to hit a stationary target board with shuriken, so there was no way they could do much in the remaining 3 rounds. There were a few who didn't manage to learn even one ninjutsu properly. And the majority didn't get all the 3 ninjutsu down. There were only 12 students who could do that. The written exams were very tough too. The last 20 marks being very difficult to get and even the 20 marks before that being significantly difficult. Fujin did note the disappointed expressions of the ones who scored very bad. It reminded him of how much worse the life of the kids here was when compared to his previous world. And even then these were considered to be very good conditions. At least they didn't have to fight in a war. Among the toppers, Yuri was upset thinking, why am I still ranked only 5th? Still I have at least shown everyone how good the Uchiha are at shuriken technique. But that's not enough. Hana was incredibly upset with tears almost forming in her eyes. She was upset at her rank dropping from 2nd to 4th. Nobu didn't show any emotions, however, even he was upset at not being able to top the exam. Teru sighed looking at the scores. Last year it was the leave concentration competition, and this time the written exam. Sucks to not be rank 1 due to the written exams. Still at least I'm the best when it comes to the skills required on the field. Not to mention, that the exam didn't consider the water-style jutsus I know. Fujin looked at the results showing a happy expression. His thoughts were, well this went as expected. Though I'm surprised that some guys scored over 80 on the written exam. I guess the brains of the kids here develop faster. My shuriken still requires some work, but that's fine. In taijutsu I doubt I'll be able to surpass Hoka unless he slacks off. In ninjutsu I'm on par with Teru and others. Heck, I could have made 8 clones and decreased their scores if I wanted to, but there was no need for it. So it's going good. Next I should focus on elemental jutsus. However, then he frowned mentally thinking, still, the performance of the kids in this exam has been so good that I'm worried they may make a few of us graduate early. I'm glad that Genki hasn't started teaching about all the other important stuff yet. I guess his plan was to allow everyone to learn ninjutsu and fighting skills first so that they can keep improving them over the years. Though with the pace at which he has been going, it makes me wonder if he wants to make us graduate early or teach us more complicated stuff. Genki looked at the expression of all his students and sighed. He noticed that only Fujin had a happy expression, Nobu was expressionless as always and Teru just looked a bit down. Almost everyone else was incredibly upset. He sighed, I got excited and made the marking system really in favor of the geniuses. Last year's results made them more competitive, however this year's might have a detrimental effect. I'll need to talk individually with everyone in order to pacify and cheer them up, so that they take this exam results as a motivation to do better in the future. He then glanced at the Inyazuka kids. I guess I should call their parents too. The exams ended with another brainwashing speech by Hiruzen. He called Fujin forward and asked him what reward he wanted this time. Fujin stepped forward and said, Lord Hokage, could I get to learn the Shadow Clone Jutsu? Hiruzen was really surprised by this request. He asked, where did you hear about the Shadow Clone Jutsu? And why do you want to learn it? Fujin showed an excited expression and said, Lord Hokage, we were told that the second Hokage had started this academy. So I became quite interested in him and hence read a lot about his life and everything he did. On understanding more about him, I was very inspired by him. And when I read that he had created the Shadow Clone Jutsu, I became very interested in it. Also, the jutsu seems very useful. Having a clone that can actually do something will be very helpful. He then looked at Hiruzen with expectations. Hiruzen looked at the excitement shown by the young student in front of him. Looking at the respect he had shown to his sensei, he emotionally thought, Sensei, even after being dead for decades, your will of fire still inspires the kids in Konoha. Hiruzen had sensed his chakra level during the Taijutsu tournament. Fujin, wanting to ask for the shadow clone jutsu, didn't bother hiding his real chakra level. Hiruzen thought, his chakra level is sufficient to be barely able to form one shadow clone. Fine, I'll give it to him, but I need to warn him about the dangers of that technique. Hiruzen nodded and said, all right, I'll prepare the scroll for you. Come to my office tomorrow at noon. Fujin showed that he was even more excited on hearing that and thanked him immediately. However, on the inside, he was quite shocked. He thought, that's it? A few good words about Tobirama and he agreed. Should I have asked for Flying Thunder God or Impure World Resurrection? He sighed internally and further thought, then again, Shadow Clone isn't really a very complex jutsu. It is just B rank and even elite Shuyunins can easily access it from the library. Also, my respect for Tobirama was genuine. Unlike Hiruzen, he did do his job properly. Though how he died in war despite knowing Flying Thunder God is a mystery to me. So Hiruzen wouldn't be able to pick up on anything. And Tobirama creating that jutsu, is written down in scrolls about him in the library. So I guess there wasn't much to be suspicious about. With those thoughts, he walked back to his fellow students. Genki then announced about meeting with everyone personally tomorrow, and gave everyone a time slot. He asked them to bring at least one parent along. Chapter 19, Shadow Clone Jutsu. The following day, Genki was very busy with the counseling of all his students. Fujin was the first one in at 8 a.m. as Genki had set the schedule according to their ranks. Seeing Fujin, Genki's thoughts were, this kid has done well. But he is only an orphan. I don't think he has any idea how vast this world is. Even though he ranked first twice consecutively, there is still a lot he needs to do. I need to ensure that he doesn't get arrogant and lose his way. Fujin first greeted him, good morning sensei. Genki replied, good morning. Congrats on your performance yesterday. Fujin smiled and replied, thank you sensei and took his seat. Genki smiled, and then quickly got serious. He said, so this meeting is in order to review your performance until now and to see what you should do in the vacation and in the next year. Of all the students from this class, I have interacted with you the most, so don't worry and listen to my advice properly. Feel free to ask all your doubts. Fujin nodded. Genki continued, your performance has been very good so far. With you ranking first in both years, that is very obvious. However, in both exams, it was only due to you scoring very well in one exam that you ranked first. Fujin nodded seriously, while thinking I'm not even 8 years old yet. Should you be having such a serious talk with me? Are 8-year-olds supposed to understand this? Genki on the other hand thought, the kid didn't get upset. He is more mature than other kids his age. Genki continued, so you will have to put more focus on other areas. Tell me, what do you do after the lecture is over? Also, what do you do on weekends? Fujin had already guessed that such a question might be asked, though he had thought something like this would have been asked long back. He replied, Sensei, I mostly study what you taught in class, try to understand it. Then I train on the ninjutsu you taught us or I do leave concentration exercise. And before sleeping, I meditate. On the weekends I study a lot and also train on my sensor skills. What Fujin said was a properly thought out answer he had prepared long back. Showing a major focus at studying would explain why his scores in written exams were so high. The listener would think that he spent most of his time studying. He said that he spent very little time on ninjutsu, which would justify his slightly lower scores there. While his meditation along with morning exercises would be the reason for the high growth in his chakra levels. The answer also showed that he was a very diligent student. Genki wasn't surprised with the answer. He had guessed that it'll be something along these lines considering Fujin's performance. He said, I see. Now let's look at your performance this year. You have done very well in the written exam, chakra control, and taijutsu. However, your ninjutsu needs a lot of work. So over the next 2 months, you should focus on improving the 3 ninjutsu I taught. Also, even after the 3rd year begins, spend more time on learning ninjutsu and less time on studying. After all, in the future, when you do missions, it'll be a lot more important than what you read. Fujin nodded, inwardly surprised, thinking that's a first. No adult has ever told me to study less. Especially not a teacher. Genki was satisfied with his words being listened to seriously. He had a little gift in order to get Fujin work more on ninjutsu. He said, I know that you have asked Lord Hokage for Shadow Clone Jutsu. So do learn it properly, in the future it'll be very helpful. However, I have a little gift for you. Saying this, he put a paper in front of Fujin. On seeing that paper, Fujin sighed internally, I wasted my 100 ryo, and then asked curiously, Sensei, what's this? Genki replied, this is chakra paper. It'll tell you what your chakra nature is. Here, pass some of your chakra through it. Fujin did it. The chakra paper split into 2. He gave Genki a puzzled look. Genki then explained a bit more about chakra paper and said that Fujin's chakra nature was wind. Fujin nodded excitedly despite already knowing it. Genki said, the way to train your wind nature is that you should take a leaf and try to cut it with your chakra alone. It may take a few months to do it. Once it is done, you can then use wind-style jutsus. Fujin nodded again. Genki also informed Fujin that Yuri and Teru could already perform elemental jutsu in order to rouse his competitive spirit. After some more discussion, Fujin took his leave. He was a bit sick of having to feign ignorance of the stuff he already knew. Still, he was a bit glad of this discussion. He would have a proper excuse if anyone in the future asked him about when he trained in wind style. Sadly, he'll still have to repeat this again today. Genki spent the remaining of his day counseling 14 other students, while the other 15 were scheduled for tomorrow. He had such advice for everyone else. Teru was advised to get the same seal as Fujin. He didn't have much advice for Nobu, so he just tried to get him to be more social. For Hana, he consoled her a bit due to how upset she was. Then he informed her that she put a lot more focus on her rank instead of important aspects. He told her to reduce her time spent on studying and leave concentration as the majority of her time was spent on it. Instead, he asked her to focus more on ninjutsu and taijutsu. For Yuri, he strongly suggested his parents to ensure that he meditates for at least an hour daily. For Hoka, the advice was to focus more on academics. And in a similar way, the advice continued all day as well as the day after. At noon, Fujin visited Hokage's office. Hiruzen handed him a scroll saying, this scroll has the Shadow Clone Jutsu. You are not allowed to share this scroll with anyone else and have to return it to me after you have learned it. Fujin nodded. Hiruzen then talked a bit about the Shadow Clone Jutsu. He warned Fujin, for the time being and maybe for the next year, don't ever try to create more than one shadow clone. Also, when you dispel the clone, all its memories will be transferred to you. And that might cause you a huge headache. So always be careful while dispelling your clones. Also, don't use shadow clones while you are sleeping. It'll be very bad for your health. Fujin nodded and thanked him again. Hiruzen then talked a bit about Tobirama and Fujin had to feign interest in listening to it. After half an hour of stories, Hiruzen finally let Fujin go. Fujin sighed and complained, "Isn't a Hokage supposed to be super busy with his paperwork? Why did he have so much time to talk with me?" 2 consecutive sessions of having to feign ignorance as well as interest had Fujin a bit tired. He decided to skip his ration bars and instead went to Ichiraku for lunch. His thoughts were, "Fuck it, I have saved decent amount of money, I can afford to treat myself for today." Soon after lunch, he started training for the Shadow Clone Jutsu. After reading it properly, he thought, "This is easily the most difficult jutsu I have seen yet. The process of molding chakra is very complicated. Makes me wonder how did that brat learn it in less than a day." However, this shadow clone is a bit more flexible than the one in Naruto. Chakra doesn't necessarily have to be distributed evenly among my clones. It is up to the caster's will and capabilities in deciding how many % of his chakra must each clone have. He could create them with equal chakra to hide himself, or give it more or less chakra depending on the need. Another difference is that dispelling the clone won't return all its chakra to the original body. Instead there is some chakra loss that happens during this process. As the jutsu is mastered, this loss reduces, however it won't ever go down to 0. So in the future, I need to be careful in the amount of clones I make. Otherwise I could run out of chakra very quickly. On finishing his analysis, he began learning shadow clone technique. Knowing the basic clone jutsu helped a bit. The training continued for a while. Fujin noted that this training drained his chakra very fast. He could only practice for an hour before he was out of chakra. So from the next day, he practiced shadow clone jutsu, as soon as he got up, then around noon, and finally again in the evening. Getting 3 hours of training done while doing either physical exercises or meditation for the remainder of the time. He also carried a few leaves with him. On the 9th day, he was finally able to make a clone. Fujin noted that while molding the chakra is more difficult, its execution was much easier than the body flicker jutsu. After another 6 days, he was finally able to create an acceptable clone. It was entirely identical and took half of his chakra. However, on sensing, Fujin noted that some chakra was lost while creating the clone, resulting in the clone having slightly less chakra. This wasn't acceptable. However, he decided to test the clone first. He asked the clone to go into the bedroom and write any random number somewhere and then dispel. The clone went into the bedroom, and wrote 8196 on a scroll there. On dispelling, Fujin got all the information and checked if it was true. He thought, alright, it works. He made another shadow clone. This time, he stabbed the clone's arm with a kunai, causing the clone to dispel. He waited for a few seconds and then concluded, alright, I just got the memories of the clone. The pain wasn't transferred to me. So this jutsu should be safe to use in battle. He then formed the clone again and this time had the clone do the 3 basic jutsus. The clone could perform them as good as he could. He couldn't test body flicker at his home, so he decided to leave it for later. He then had the clone perform shadow clone. The clone managed to do it, but within a second, they were both dispelled. Fujin sensed that their chakra was very unstable. On thinking, he came to the conclusion, the clones were dispelled as they didn't have enough chakra. Even though a ninja could make a shadow clone with a small % of his chakra, the shadow clone still needs to have some minimum chakra level. And my single clone, probably barely exceeds that limit. Wait, does that mean, after using a few jutsus, my clone will disappear even if it has some chakra just because the chakra isn't enough? This conclusion had him on alert. He quickly rushed into a mini forest nearby. After transforming and confirming no one was around, he made a shadow clone. The clone, knowing the plan, started performing body flicker again and again, within the main body's chakra field as the main body kept a track of its chakra level. The clone had around 49% of Fujin's chakra. When it fell down below 41%, the clone dispelled. Having confirmed his theory, Fujin sighed, "I guess it is impossible to have the clone assist me in ninjutsu training. Though to be honest, it's kinda pointless too, as I can't last long on ninjutsu training without having my chakra depleted." After spending half a minute grumbling about his low chakra reserves, he decided, well, whatever. This was expected. Hopefully someday in the future, I'll be able to use clones to train. Let's just learn this jutsu properly and be done. In the next 5 days, he had learned the shadow clone, to an acceptable level. Now no loss of chakra happened while forming the clone. As for the chakra loss while getting chakra back from the clone, it was around 5%. Fujin noticed that it was reducing quickly. With the work on shadow clone done, he decided that it was time to finally start practicing elemental jutsus. Though he decided to wait for another 10 days before he returned the scroll to Hiruzen. That way Hiruzen would underestimate his talent a bit. Chapter 20, Wind Release Jutsu. A/N, the number of wind-style jutsu in canon is pitiful. Even the fillers mostly have similar variants of canon jutsu with very little change, but do the same shit. So I'll be using wind jutsu from games or even fan-created ones. I'll also make up some wind jutsu at some point later in this fanfic. On the 21st day of his vacation, Fujin made his way to the library. On the road, he thought about a lot of wind-style jutsu. His thoughts were, finally I'll be starting with wind release jutsu. In the series, wind was probably the least powerful element. Though Naruto had wind nature, all he used was Raisin Shuriken. Temari did have a lot of jutsu, but she used a giant fan. Kakuzu used pressure damage, which was very lethal. I think there was also Great Breakthrough used by Orochimaru and probably Gale Palm used by someone. And lastly, Danzo used his vacuum jutsu, which were very lethal. Sadly, other than Temari, no one else specialized in wind jutsu. And the number of wind jutsu were very low too. Luckily this world does have a lot more wind release jutsu. I might be able to form a comprehensive battle system through it. Last time I just read their names. This time I'll be reading their scrolls too. And then decide the set of jutsu to practice. Still I wish I could have got to read the descriptions of higher ranked wind jutsu as well. It'd have been very helpful in order to decide. On reaching there, he went through entire sections E and D and made a list of all available wind release jutsu. They were Gale Jutsu, Wind Clone, Wind Levitation, Projectile Control Jutsu, Wind Retrieving Jutsu, Gale Surge, Breakthrough, Dust Cloud, Slashing Wind Skill, Wind Explosion, Propelling Winds. The first question for Fujin was, why was Wind Clone merely a rank E jutsu? On reading the scroll, he understood why. Wind Clone was extremely simple. Elemental clones were like normal clones, just that they were made of elements. That's why they could perform attacks. They got dispelled upon getting hit. Since the material needed for a wind clone was basically the air around, it was extremely simple to make it. However, it was still quite useful, and something he definitely was going to learn. He continued reading the rest of the jutsu to understand what they did. He first read all the rank E jutsu. After reading them, he analyzed, these jutsu aren't lethal. Actually, they don't have much use in battle either if compared to other jutsu. Instead, I think that they are the means to improve the control of the wind element. I think they will be very important in the future when I will be learning more complex and powerful wind jutsu. Wind levitation is basically using winds in order to raise inanimate objects in the air. The weight of the object that can be levitated and the height to which it can be carried as well as the time for which it can be levitated depends on the user's control over the wind element as well as their stamina and focus. Projectile control jutsu uses wind to control the projectiles launched around a user. So a shuriken or a thrown kunao or senbon can be manipulated to change direction with the help of winds. Wind retrieving jutsu uses winds to pull objects towards the user. It's similar to Nagato's universal pull, except it's done with the help of winds and power depends entirely on the user. And gale jutsu just creates a small wind flow in a direction. It doesn't cause any harm, but has a couple of good uses. For example, it could be used to cover up any footsteps left behind, or change the direction of winds around you to restrict the directions your scent can be carried to. Besides, it probably also serves as a base to all wind jutsu that involves blowing out air. On concluding his analysis, he sighed thinking, I'll have to learn all these jutsu. Not for combat, but to improve my control over wind. That said, wind clone, levitation, control and pulling, these are excellent jutsu for pranking. I wonder if the ones who made these were pranksters or something. While thinking about it, an incredibly evil idea popped into Fujin's head. An idea that would have made the lives of Konoha's citizens a living nightmare. He thought, I wonder what kind of shit Naruto would pull if he knew these 5 jutsu. He sucked as a student, maybe as a ninja too, but he was easily tier S in terms of pranks. Damn, I'm so tempted to teach him this stuff. I'd get enough content to laugh for a lifetime. Fujin had a laugh at that idea. Calming himself down and getting these distracting thoughts out of his mind, he started reading the rank D scrolls. After finishing them all, he concluded with a single thought, damn, wind release is extremely powerful. That thought wasn't due to the jutsu being overpowered, but instead due to the growth potential of the wind jutsu. Some of those jutsu, if mastered, and used correctly, could end up becoming as good as rank B or even rank A jutsu. He then analyzed each jutsu. Dust cloud jutsu is basically just a smoke screen. It should work well with me being a sensor and not needing eyesight to track the enemy. Also, it is very simple, so if I have time, it's worth learning. Slashing wind jutsu is the one Tamari spammed in the Chuyunin exam. While it packs good power, it requires a fan to use. It's not really my preferred weapon. So I'll probably skip this one. Breakthrough jutsu is a powered down version of Great Breakthrough Jutsu. No harm in learning it. I can later replace it with Great Breakthrough and then maybe with pressure damage. Gale Surge is a defensive jutsu. The user sends the air around the user in an outward direction. It could protect me from projectiles and could also disturb the enemy's rhythm. Though its range is too short, at merely 3 meters. Propelling winds is a movement technique. Small blasts of winds are released from the hands in order to help evade. This jutsu is pretty simple. I am not really a fan of it, however I have some ideas in the future that could require this jutsu as the base. Wind explosion jutsu seems very versatile. Chakra is infused into wind, to form into a ball like Raise-non and it explodes on impact. Though it isn't as powerful as the Raise-non and only causes slight damage, it is a very interesting jutsu. I wonder if a combination of this jutsu and wind clone jutsu exists. It could make wind clones extremely lethal. Having analyzed all the jutsu, he had to make the tough final decision of deciding which jutsu to learn. He thought, all of these jutsu have good uses. However, will I be able to learn all of them? He was lost in his thoughts. Not able to reach a conclusion, he decided to calm himself a bit and analyzed further. As for how many of these jutsu I can learn, will depend on my speed of learning these jutsu. And just learning is rather pointless. I'll need to master them. For now, let's eliminate the ones I don't want to learn. It will be slashing wind jutsu. He sighed, this is the only one I don't want to learn. I want to learn all the others. Never mind, let's list them in the order of importance. Rank-E jutsu are important to be able to get a better control of wind nature. So they are compulsory. Among the remaining, wind explosion jutsu would probably be the most useful considering its future potential. Next would be wind propelling jutsu. While it in itself ain't that good, however, if in the future, I'm able to create small blasts of wind willingly around my body to propel myself, then that might become a deadly fighting style. Breakthrough jutsu would be next as it forms the basis of a few stronger jutsu. Also it provides an AoE option. Gale Surge and Dust Cloud will be the last ones. Gale Surge provides defense in one direction, but it is very temporary. And Dust Cloud just provides cover. I suppose that's enough calculations. I still have a few years before I may have to fight. So let's just try these jutsu. Hopefully a year will be enough for it. Next year I would like to learn a few earth release jutsu and probably 1 or 2 genjutsu. I suppose this year I should also start with kenjutsu. Maybe a sword or 2. They go really well with wind release. Ending his train of thoughts, he read the scroll of wind release, wind clone jutsu properly. After getting the basics down, he left the library and on arriving in a secluded mini forest, started training for it. However, what happened really surprised him. It only took him one try to be able to do the wind clone jutsu. He was left speechless by the ease of it. After calming himself, he analyzed, the jutsu is very similar to normal clone jutsu and I have already learned even shadow clones. Not to mention, my affinity is wind nature and I have already trained a lot to master this element. So I suppose it's no wonder I'm able to learn it in one try. Actually, if I compare it with Itachi, then this achievement isn't much worth mentioning. He was able to do Fireball Jutsu, a rank C jutsu, on his first try. So it shouldn't be that big of a deal. He comforted himself saying, it's alright. This is the fruit of my hard work over the last 3 years. He spent the rest of the day testing the capabilities of his wind clone. Unlike shadow clones, it didn't transfer memories back, but it didn't require high amounts of chakra either. Since it used the air around it, Fujin guessed that this is the most chakra-friendly clone jutsu. In merely a few hours, he managed to create 10 wind clones. It could do all the jutsu the main body could, except shadow clone, and would dispel on taking a hit. After experimenting, Fujin realized that in a head-on battle, wind clones would be more effective than shadow clones. Many times that day, he had the thought of going back to the library and learning another jutsu. However, he didn't act on that urge as it might have attracted attention. He sighed thinking, I should have found a way to steal those scrolls. After being satisfied with his progress, he returned home. On the way, he had a peculiar thought about the jutsu he had learned so far. He thought, of the 6 jutsu I know, 3 of them are clone jutsu. The next day, he read and learned Gale Jutsu. He had to first gather the chakra and then expel it from his mouth as a gust of wind. He was able to perform it properly after a few tries. The jutsu was really harmless. When he tried it on a tree, except some old leaves falling down, it didn't cause any harm to the tree at all. After an hour of practice, he could cover up the footsteps he left behind. Using the jutsu to change the direction of wind in a small area took a few hours to practice. Though he had no idea how successful or unsuccessful he was at covering up his scent. He decided to have an Inyazuka check it sometime in the future. The next day, he tried learning wind levitation jutsu. While he didn't get this one on his first try, he still managed to perform it correctly within 10 minutes. He was able to levitate a leaf in air at a height of about 5 meters. It took him half an hour to do the same with a pebble. By the end of the day, he could levitate stones with a diameter of 15 centimeters in at a height of 15 meters and maintain it for 78 seconds. He had read in the scroll that this jutsu could be used to lift a boulder over 100 meters in the sky. And he guessed that even that wasn't its limit. So in the future, he could keep practicing it to his heart's content. The next day he tried the projectile control jutsu. And he finally had a challenge. This jutsu needed really fine control over the wind. He created a wind clone and had it launch shurikens and tried to control it. After a few hours, he managed to change the direction of the shuriken, but he couldn't control it. Since the shuriken spun, he felt that it made the jutsu harder and decided to experiment with the kunao instead. It decreased the difficulty considerably, and at the end of the day, he managed to maintain decent control on a thrown kunao. He practiced this jutsu for another 3 days in order to get a better hang of it. After these 4 days, he felt as if he had a better grasp on the wind element. The following day, he tried the wind retrieving jutsu. Attracting an object towards yourself by having the winds flow towards you proved to be a challenge. The wind flowing towards yourself was the first obstacle. The second was that if he was able to create a strong enough wind flow, he himself would be affected by it. That issue made Fujin wonder if he could create wind paths around himself to perform this jutsu. He left that thought for the future. It took him 3 days to learn this jutsu and be comfortable with it. He returned the shadow clone scroll to Hiruzen after that.